Good morning. Ça marche là? Good morning? Non. Good morning. Non, ça fonctionne pas. Hello, good morning everyone. Good morning, Chris. Okay, it's not working, the loudspeakers, is it? No. But we're now shouting, or yeah. No. Good morning, everyone. So, good morning, everyone. We're going to be starting in a couple of moments. I'd be grateful if you could take your places, please.
What a pleasant surprise. I had no idea I would run into you here. Amazing. Lovely to see you. Looking good, mashallah. Yeah. Thank you. अच्छा कल दोपहर को पहुँचे शॉप पे बस ये है अभी शाम क्या नेक्स्ट टाइम व्हाट आर योर प्लान्स एंड वेयर आर यू नेक्स्ट प्लान यार इसके बारे में कुछ हाँ मुझे आगे मैंने भी देखा तो व्हाट आर यू अभी यहाँ पे यू कवरिंग योर oh no you're of course with the interaction yeah okay nice lovely yeah
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Is the microphone? No. They're supposed to. The technical. See. Good morning, excellent. Okay. Now it's. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. We'll be now starting the International Conference on Climate Resilient Pakistan. I'm Julian Harness, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Pakistan. I'll be the Master of Ceremonies for the morning. An administrative detail. We will not be using the loudspeaker during the presentations. All the interventions will be done through translation, and therefore please use the listeners, otherwise you won't be able to hear what's being said. Thank you. I would now like to request His Excellency Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, to formally commence the proceedings of the conference with the welcome remarks. Sir.
Honourable Prime Minister of Pakistan, distinguished Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished Presidents, Prime Ministers and Ministers, heads of agencies and representatives of participating delegations, Assalamu alaikum. It is my great privilege and singular honour as the Foreign Minister of Pakistan to welcome all of you to this international conference hosted by the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the UN Secretary General. As you are all aware, last year Pakistan experienced what the UN Secretary General called a monster monsoon on steroids. This is the greatest climate disaster in our country's history. Our monster monsoon started in June and kept going into July to the end of August. When the rains finally stopped, a 100-kilometer lake formed in the middle of our country. 1 in 7 Pakistanis were affected by this natural disaster. That's 33 million people. Of the 33 million people, 16 million were children, 600,000 pregnant women. And 5 months on, many areas of Pakistan are still underwater. We are still conducting our relief operations, and we are looking forward to our reconstruction and rehabilitation. We welcome you all here at this unique conference for a resilient Pakistan, where the international community has come together in solidarity to stand beside a country that faced an epic natural disaster. Pakistan, once again, expresses its gratitude to the community of nations for the emergency assistance extended to our people. We highly appreciate the United Nations General Assembly's call for the convening of this conference. The magnitude of the damage Pakistan has suffered is monumental. While we remain steadfast in responding to the emergency needs of the affected population and the urgency of restoring their lives and livelihoods, we are according high priority to the resilient recovery and reconstruction of the affected infrastructure. The government of Pakistan has worked with international institutions, including the United Nations, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Union, to prepare a comprehensive framework document on resilient recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. The 4RF document, which outlines a prioritized and sequential plan defined at the federal and provincial levels to rebuild better from the unprecedented flood disaster and to ensure resilience against future natural disasters. Clearly, Pakistan confronts a monumental challenge. The people and the government will, of course, do everything possible to help ourselves in the process of rebuilding and recovery from this colossal calamity. At least half of the framework plan will be implemented from our own resources. At the level of our local communities, we are already engaged in rebuilding and restoration of homes, villages, roads, and communication networks. Yet Pakistan will need considerable support over the next several years from our international partners to implement this comprehensive plan. We will transform the challenge of recovery and reconstruction into an opportunity to build a more resilient Pakistan, an economy which is dynamic and sustainable. We are determined to do it in an open, transparent, and collaborative way. Excellencies, the rationale for this conference is to demonstrate the international solidarity with Pakistan as it begins its journey towards building back better. We see this conference not as a one-off event, but as the commencement of a long-term partnership with our friends and development partners. We look forward to the generous and sustained commitment of support from you all. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. We will now watch a video on the floods and rains in Pakistan. I now request the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, to give his remarks.
Your Excellency Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Excellencies, dear friends, thank you all for gathering in solidarity with the people of Pakistan. For decades, I've been privileged to witness the boundless generosity and resilience of the Pakistani people amidst grave threats and upheaval. From earthquakes and floods, to years of relentless terrorist attacks, to geopolitical nightmares like the wars in Afghanistan that have sent millions fleeing across the Pakistani border in search of safety over the decades, a trend that continues today. But even through the darkest moments, the giving spirit of the Pakistani people has shone brightly. I've seen neighbors helping neighbors with food, water and shelter. And I've seen Pakistani communities welcome Afghan refugees with open arms despite their scarce resources. So my heart broke when I saw firsthand the utter devastation of last summer's floods. No country deserves to endure what happened to Pakistan. But it was especially bitter to watch that country's generous spirit being repaid with a climate disaster of monumental scale. As the video we just watched showed, the epic floods were nothing short of a monsoon on steroids, as I mentioned in my visit, submerging 1/3 of the country, 3 times the area of my own country, Portugal. A terrifying wall of water killed more than 1,700 people, injured thousands more, and affected a total of more than 33 million, displacing 8 million people. It swept over roads, ruined millions of acres of agricultural land, and damaged or destroyed 2 million homes. And it pushed back 9 million people to the brink of poverty. These are not numbers on a page. They are individual women, children, and men. They are families and communities. And under the leadership of the government of Pakistan, the United Nations donors and friends rallied to assist. Tents, food, water, medicine, and cash transfers were distributed. And the humanitarian response plan of $816 million was launched. But all of that is just a trickle of support in the face of the growing flood of need. At the same time, the people of Pakistan met this epic tragedy with heroic humanity. From the first responders rushing to affected communities, to the doctors and nurses I met, fighting against time to save lives in overcrowded hospitals. And I will never forget hearing the personal testimonies of women and men I met in September in the wake of the ruins. They left their own homes and all their worldly possessions to help their neighbors escape the rising waters. They sacrificed all they had to help others and bring them to safety. Excellencies, we must match the heroic response of the people of Pakistan with our own efforts and massive investments to strengthen their communities for the future. Rebuilding Pakistan in a resilient way will run in excess of $16 billion US, and far more will be needed in the longer term. And this includes not only flood recovery and rehabilitation efforts, but also initiatives to address daunting social, environmental, and economic challenges. Reconstructing homes and buildings, redesigning public infrastructure, including roads, bridges, schools and hospitals, jump-starting jobs and agriculture, ensuring that technology and knowledge are shared with Pakistan to support its efforts to build a climate-resilient future. And throughout, supporting women and children, we are up to 14 times more likely than men to die during disasters and face the brunt of upheaval and loss in humanitarian crises. women are consistently on the front lines of support during times of crisis, including in Pakistan. Their efforts are essential to a strong, equal, inclusive recovery. It is crucial that women play their full part as leaders and participants at every level, contributing their insights and solutions. And we also need to right a fundamental wrong. Pakistan is doubly victimized by climate chaos and the morally bankrupt global financial system. That system routinely denies middle-income countries the debt relief and concessional funding needed to invest in resilience against natural disasters. And so we need creative ways for developing countries to access debt relief and concessional financing when they need it the most. And above all, we need to be honest about the brutal injustice and loss and damage suffered by developing countries because of climate change. If there is any doubt about loss and damage, go to Pakistan. There is loss, there is damage. The devastation of climate change is real. From floods and droughts to cyclones and torrential rains. And as always, those developing countries least responsible are the first to suffer. Pakistan, which represents less than 1% of global emissions, did not cause the climate crisis, but it is living with its worst impacts. South Asia is one of the world's global climate crisis hotspots, in which people are 15 times more likely to die from climate impacts than elsewhere. At a recent UN climate conference in Egypt, the world made some important breakthroughs. This includes progress on addressing loss and damage, speeding the shift to renewables, and an unprecedented call to reform the global financial architecture, particularly multilateral development banks. It also includes accelerating efforts to cover every person in the world with early warning systems against climate disasters within 5 years. But we need to go much further. Countries on the front lines of the climate crisis need massive support. Developed countries must deliver on their commitment to double adaptation finance and meet the $100 billion goal urgently without delay. And we need to reverse the outrageous trend of emissions going up when they must go down to prevent further climate catastrophe. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today's conference is the first step on a much longer journey towards recovery and reconstruction in Pakistan. The United Nations will be there for the long hand. The world must be too. And at every step, we will be inspired by the endurance and generosity of the people of Pakistan in this critical and colossal mission. Thank you.
Thank you deeply, Secretary General. I now call upon the Prime Minister of Pakistan, His Excellency Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif, to give his remarks. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Foreign Minister Bilawal Zardari Bhutto, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning and guten Morgen. It's really a great pleasure and an honor to be here, and I express my profound gratitude to my friend Secretary General for co-chairing with me this conference. And also, I want to convey, Secretary General, the deep feelings of the people of Pakistan, the way you have promoted their cause, spoken about their miseries and problems, and become a very powerful voice to articulate what they went through during this summer. I remember on 10th of September, I was with you, along with Foreign Minister, in refugee camps in the province of Sindh and Balochistan, and you were standing by orphans, widows, mothers, and I remember vividly, you met a mother who had given birth to a child the night earlier, and a makeshift school run by UNICEF. Excellency, this the people of Pakistan will remember forever. I'm also very grateful to so many heads of states and governments, as well as ministers and other partners who have joined us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a turning point of history. Events are moving faster than we can imagine. And it is not only a question of how to survive, but it's a question how to maintain our bodies. It's a question how to maintain our dignity and honor by moving forward with a sense of purpose and a sense of achievement. Secretary General, as you have just mentioned, the Foreign Minister, you so aptly described, at that time, at the heart of the perfect storm of problems lies this prolonged exposure to a monsoon on steroids. In a matter of 2 months, the ground beneath us was literally, physically taken away. The tsunami, the most devastating floods, affected 33 million people of Pakistan, killed more than 1,700 people, including children, and dislocated 8 million people. More than 8,000 kilometers of roads were washed away, and more than 3,000 rail system was deeply damaged. Education was disrupted for 2.6 million students, including 1 million girls. One can go on about the records broken by this disaster, but truly speaking, we are racing against time. We are very grateful to the generous support extended to my country by the United Nations, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the IMF, the AIIB, and the European Union, as well as many friendly countries around the globe. However, relief work is yet not over, especially in parts of Sindh and Balochistan. Our young and able Foreign Minister belongs to the province of Sindh, where the flood water still needs to be drained to reclaim the agricultural land, to grow food, to build homes, reconstruct infrastructure, and rehabilitate institutions and services. Excellencies, you will appreciate that we need to give 33 million people who are deeply affected by the floods their future back. Their families must stand on their feet, and they must come back in life and earn their livelihood. Today's convening is an attempt to give my people another chance at getting back on their feet. Last October, in collaboration with our development partners, we prepared a post-disaster needs assessment, PDNA, that calculated the total destruction and economic losses from the floods to exceed $30 billion, which is 8% of Pakistan's GDP, pushing 9 million people into abject poverty. Excellencies, the Pakistani nation, as well as the state, has responded courageously to this catastrophe. Those who had little came forward to help those who had lost everything. Millions volunteered to feed, clothe and shelter their unfortunate brothers and sisters. 20,000 troops, hundreds of helicopters, aircrafts and motorboats were mobilized for round-the-clock rescue operations. And in that, I count those wonderful contributions from our friendly countries in the Middle East, in Europe, Far East, and from other parts of the world. They saved thousands of lives and quickly restored disrupted communications. All resilience funds were repurposed to provide cash grants of over $400 million to more than 2.7 million households. Despite our acute financial constraints, we mobilized around $575 million for the emergency, including the UN flash appeal. Excellencies, the one lesson we have learned is that nothing can go back to business as usual. Tough choices will continue to be made, and I'm painfully aware that a taxonomy of harder and harsher reforms will make lives in the Pakistani streets and villages harsher than ever before. But the scale of the resource gap for funding crisis recovery is so wide that it has redefined how we think about resilience. Frankly, it has changed life forever. Building on the post-disaster needs assessment, my government has prepared a comprehensive framework plan for recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction with resilience. Its broad contours are set out in the 4RF document that will be presented to you in the next session of the conference. The first part of the 4RF plan reflects the priorities for recovery and reconstruction, bearing in mind the minimum funding requirement of $16.3 billion, half of which is proposed to be met from domestic resources and the other half from our own development partners and friends. The second part of the framework plan incorporates flood resilience in the design and infrastructure projects, such as protecting key highways, the main railway line network, as well as an early warning system and capacity building for rescue and relief in future disasters. Our funding gap for minimum recovery is $8 billion and will be needed over the span of the next 3 years. Excellencies, it is clear that Pakistan's ability to recover from the colossal flood disaster, to restore critical infrastructure and revive rapid economic growth will hinge substantially on the speed of these actions. And the most important link in this chain will be financial resourcing. If that gap continues to obstruct our recovery and minimum resilience needs, the results may be too catastrophic to imagine. This conference is not just about helping to rebuild the lives and livelihoods of the people affected by global crisis. In fact, it is about the solidarity and vision needed to ensure the world's transition to a sustainable future, not just on paper or PowerPoint, but on the ground, in schools, in the fields, in businesses, in industry and homes. Even as we plan for a future of resilience, The shocks that disaster bring can never be wholly accounted for, but resilient societies look for the light of opportunity in the darkness of disaster. It is precisely this kind of strategic reset that I'm trying to kickstart today in seeking your support for a recovery plan for the people of Pakistan who are, by the grace of God, very resilient. I know these are times of extreme pressure and economic hardships in many countries, but Pakistan needs a new coalition of the willing, one that can save lives and put them on a path to responsible global citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm asking of you is more than a rebooting of your compassion for humanitarian relief needs. Today, I am asking for your support for those who have lost their life savings, their homes and livelihoods, those who are sitting under blue sky, facing the harshest of winters and looking forward to your help and support from mankind. I am asking for a sustained international support plan to meet this daunting challenge. I am asking for a new lifeline for people who need to power our economy and re-enter the 21st century with a future that is protected for such extreme risks to human security. Together, we have to rebuild their lives and their dreams. Your solidarity and long-term support to the people of Pakistan at this very critical juncture will make the difference between staying unprepared or facing the future with renewed hope and aspirations. In the end, I thank you once again for your support in this conference today. Your unity of thought and action will always be remembered by the people of Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your leadership. I now request Son Excellence Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, Président de la République française, to join us remotely from Paris.
Merci beaucoup et bonjour à toutes et tous, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Shehbaz Sharif, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs et représentants permanents. Merci d'avoir organisé cette conférence et de me permettre de prendre la parole devant vous pour témoigner le soutien de la France au Pakistan. Nous l'avons fait dès l'été dernier, lorsque le pire est arrivé, et je veux, après les images que nous avons vues, après les mots que vous avez eus, Monsieur le Premier ministre, et les témoignages du secrétaire général, dire la grande estime, l'admiration et la solidarité du peuple français à l'égard du peuple pakistanais. Votre peuple, votre gouvernement se sont mobilisés avec beaucoup de force et de courage après les effets directs du changement climatique que vous avez subis. Et je souhaite également saluer le travail de la Banque mondiale, de la Banque asiatique de développement, du PNUD, de l'Union européenne et du gouvernement pakistanais pour la qualité du rapport dit 4F, qui constitue la matrice de l'effort de reconstruction et d'adaptation dans lequel s'engage le Pakistan avec l'aide de la communauté internationale. Monsieur le secrétaire général, Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous avez décrit aussi précisément que nécessaire l'impact de ces inondations sur la population, sur l'économie, les infrastructures, l'habitat et au fond, le défi qui est le nôtre est de répondre à l'urgence, de bâtir la résilience et d'en tirer les conséquences à long terme sur notre organisation internationale. L'urgence, nous avons tenté d'y répondre dès les premiers jours. La France s'est mobilisée avec l'envoi de matériel et de personnel au plus près des populations touchées. L'Union européenne a mobilisé un total de 14 millions d'euros. Des dizaines d'autres pays et agences internationales se sont mobilisés en ce sens. Pourtant, à ce jour, seuls 30% de l'appel d'urgence lancé par l'ONU ont été couverts. Or, des besoins humanitaires importants demeurent, d'abord sur le plan alimentaire. Et ils deviennent d'autant plus pressants avec la chute des températures durant les mois d'hiver. je veux ici vous dire que la France va prendre sa part de responsabilité en ajoutant une nouvelle contribution de 10 millions d'euros à cet appel d'urgence. Sur le plan de la santé, le Fonds mondial de lutte contre le sida, la tuberculose et le paludisme, dont la France est le deuxième contributeur mondial, ainsi approuvé un financement d'urgence là aussi de 10 millions de dollars pour fournir aux Pakistanais des produits de santé vitaux et assurer aux victimes de la catastrophe un accès au diagnostic et aux différents traitements. Le deuxième élément, je le disais, c'est la résilience et donner la possibilité de reconstruire en intégrant pleinement le risque climatique. Parce que ces effets ne vont pas disparaître malheureusement à court terme. Nous devons donc démontrer que lorsqu'un pays est exposé à un choc de cette ampleur, la communauté internationale et en particulier l'ensemble des institutions financières sont capables de se mobiliser pour l'accompagner vers une reconstruction plus résiliente. En ce qui concerne la France, l'adaptation climatique est au cœur de l'action de l'Agence française de développement et nous y consacrons ainsi 2 milliards d'euros par an, conformément à nos engagements internationaux nécessités que le secrétaire général a rappelé à l'instant. Au Pakistan, nous avons donc décidé de mobiliser un total de 360 millions d'euros de projets qui vont être lancés pour répondre aux défis de la reconstruction résiliente et donc de l'adaptation climatique. Enfin, l'objectif, je le disais, est de tirer toutes les conséquences de ce qui vient de se passer et d'accompagner les autorités pakistanaises à procéder justement à toutes les réformes et de les accompagner dans cette reconstruction en étant cohérents dans le cadre de la finance internationale. En effet, ce qui s'est passé illustre parfaitement la question des pertes et dommages que nous évoquions à Sharm el-Sheikh il y a quelques semaines. Et je veux vous dire ici le soutien de la France à l'agenda de Bridgetown. Nous avons décidé avec la première ministre de la Barbade d'œuvrer en ce sens. Et je souhaite que nous puissions justement accompagner à court terme le Pakistan dans ses renégociations avec les agences financières multilatérales, mais plus largement que nous puissions, pour le Pakistan et tous les pays qui sont plongés dans cette situation, au-delà du fonds qui a été décidé à Sharm el-Sheikh sur les loss and damages, pouvoir tirer les conséquences et rebâtir un partenariat soutenable entre le Nord et le Sud. C'est l'objectif de la conférence que nous organiserons en juin prochain à Paris, qui a vocation à accompagner et à jeter les bases d'une rénovation profonde des règles et de la Banque mondiale et du FMI, mais plus largement de nos règles de financement pour tirer toutes les conséquences de ces effets du climat. C'est aussi pourquoi la France s'engagera dans le cadre de la COP28 aux côtés des Émirats arabes unis, mais aussi au G7 et au G20 sur cet agenda. Voilà les trois éléments essentiels que je souhaitais apporter à cette conférence, en vous disant aussi que la France, évidemment, est prête à participer au groupe international de soutien qui permettra d'accompagner le Pakistan dans la mise en œuvre de l'aide internationale. Et au-delà des engagements du jour, au-delà des engagements pris pour les prochains mois, vous dire que nous serons au quotidien et dans la durée, par ces soutiens financiers et l'expertise dont vous aurez besoin, aux côtés du Pakistan pour sa reconstruction durable, pour l'aide d'urgence et pour tirer toutes les conséquences de ce que vous venez de vivre. Monsieur le Premier ministre, permettez-moi de vous dire de manière plus personnelle notre soutien plein et entier et vous demander de transmettre à votre peuple le soutien du peuple français. Merci à toutes et tous.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. We will now hear a video statement from His Excellency Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the President of the Republic of Turkey.
Pakistan İslam Cumhuriyeti Başbakanı Sayın Şahbaz Şerif, Sayın Genel Sekreter, kıymetli misafirler, sizleri şahsım ve milletim adına en kalbi duygularımla selamlıyorum. Değerli kardeşim Başbakan Sayın Şahbaz Şerif'e ve Birleşmiş Milletler Genel Sekreteri Sayın Guterres'e nazik davetleri için teşekkür ediyorum. Geçtiğimiz aylarda yaşanan sel felaketleri nedeniyle Pakistanlı kardeşlerimize bir kez daha geçmiş olsun dileklerimi iletiyorum. Hayatını kaybedenlere Allah'tan rahmet, yakınlarına sabrı cemil, yaralılara acil şifalar niyaz ediyorum. Türkiye olarak tarih boyunca hep olduğu gibi bu zor gününde de Pakistan halkını yalnız bırakmadık. 15 uçak ve 13 trenle gönderdiğimiz 7.500 tondan fazla insani yardım malzemesini ulaştırdık. İlaveten yerelden temin ettiğimiz ürünleri afetzedelerle paylaştık. Ayrıca 1630 tondan fazla insani yardım taşıyan 2 gemi gönderdik. İnşallah bu gemilerin de limanlara varmasıyla Pakistanlı kardeşlerimizin sıkıntılarının bir nebze olsun hafifleyeceğine inanıyorum. Sel felaketlerinin hemen ardından İçişleri ve Çevre Bakanlarımız, TOKİ ve AFAD temsilcileriyle birlikte Pakistan'ı ziyaret etti. Heyetimiz afet bölgelerinde incelemelerde bulundu ve Pakistan makamlarından bilgi aldı. Gerek belirlenen ihtiyaçların giderilmesi, gerekse meselenin uluslararası kamuoyunun gündemine taşınması noktasında yoğun gayret sarf edildi. Türkiye'nin yanı sıra diğer ülke ve uluslararası kuruluşların da çabalarıyla Pakistan halkının yaralarını sarmaya başladığını görüyoruz. Ancak iklim krizinin yıkıcı etkileri karşısında daha fazla müşterek çalışmaya ihtiyaç olduğu aşikardır. İklim değişikliği ve bunun yol açtığı sorunlar insanlığın ortak meselesidir. Pakistan'da vuku bulan felaket, iklim değişikliğinin yıkıcı etkilerini bir kez daha gözler önüne sermiştir. Bu ve benzeri felaketlerle mücadeleyi bir strateji çerçevesinde dayanışma içinde yürütmek gerekiyor. Türkiye bu küresel mücadeleye katkı sağlama bakımından üzerine düşen sorumlulukları yerine getirmektedir. Zarar gören afet bölgelerinin yanı sıra Pakistan'ın afete uğrama riski bulunan tüm bölgelerinin iklime dayanıklı şekilde yeniden inşa edilmesi, yeni acılar yaşanmasının önüne geçecektir. Türkiye, Pakistan'daki afetzedelerin acil ihtiyaçlarının temini ile yeniden inşa sürecine gereken katkıyı sağlamaya hazırdır. TOKİ Başkanlığımız bu hususta Pakistan makamlarıyla temaslarını sürdürüyor. AFAD ve sivil toplum kuruluşlarımız da insani yardımların ulaştırılması konusunda gereken her türlü hassasiyeti sergiliyor. Tarih boyunca nice zorluğun üstesinden gelen Pakistanlı kardeşlerimizin Allah'ın izniyle bu sıkıntılı dönemi de suhuletle atlatacağına inanıyorum. Türkiye olarak geçmişte olduğu gibi önümüzdeki dönemde de kardeş Pakistan halkının yanında olmaya devam edeceğiz. Rabbim Pakistanlı kardeşlerimizi her türlü afetten, musibetten muhafaza buyursun diyorum. Sözlerime son verirken konferansın uluslararası toplumun Pakistan'a olan desteğine ivme kazandırmasını diliyorum. Programın icrasında görev alan herkese teşekkür ediyor. Sizleri bir kez daha muhabbetle selamlıyorum.
We will now hear a video statement from His Excellency Mr. Jonas Gahr Støre, Prime Minister of Norway.
Prime Minister Sharif, Secretary General Guterres, ladies and gentlemen. The catastrophic floods that hit Pakistan last year caused unimaginable damage. Norway and many other countries contributed to the immediate response, but the needs remain enormous. We must do more to find collective solutions to the foremost challenge of our times, climate change. As you remind us, Secretary General, climate change is increasing the severity of natural disasters. We need to find new solutions to build climate-resilient communities for the future in Pakistan and beyond. At COP27, I had the honor to co-chair a roundtable with you, Prime Minister Sharif, where loss and damage was a key item on the agenda. And I can assure you, Norway will play its part in following up the decisions taken in Sharm el-Sheikh. We will maintain our direct support to Pakistan in the period ahead and focus our attention on helping those whose lives have been devastated by climate change. This is an endeavour for the entire international community, and you can count on Norway taking its part. Thank you and good luck.
There will now be a video statement by Her Excellency Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission.
Fellow leaders, dear Prime Minister Sharif, dear Secretary General Guterres, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Prime Minister Sharif and Secretary General Antonio Guterres for this timely conference. 2022 was a difficult year for the world. We just overcame the pandemic and Russia started its brutal invasion against Ukraine. But on top of this, Pakistan was hit by one of the biggest natural disasters anywhere. Deadly flooding, which affected millions of people. It destroyed livelihoods, crops and infrastructure, and put pressure on the most vulnerable people. The European Union, together with its member states, was among the first to react. Our Team Europe response to this tragedy was immediate and substantial. But the scale of the devastation is enormous. Vast surfaces of cropland and villages remained underwater for months. Nearly 10 million girls and boys remain in need of immediate support, according to UNICEF. So more support is needed. And today we are endorsing an ambitious reconstruction plan. We are joining forces with our partners to help put Pakistan on its path to recovery. Our Team Europe support to the reconstruction of Pakistan is around 500 million euro, including our humanitarian assistance. And the EU and Pakistan have just agreed an 87 million euro package in line with our Global Gateway strategy. In parallel to keep supporting the affected communities, the European Union is stepping up its humanitarian assistance with an additional 10 million euros. This brings Team Europe's humanitarian support for Pakistan to 172 million euros. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Pakistan is in the hands of its people. I wish the government of Pakistan every success with the implementation of its ambitious reform plan. We will continue to assist, including through the support group to be created following this conference. I wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
I now request His Excellency Mr. Ignacio Cassis, Federal Councillor, Head of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland, to give a statement. Sir.
Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'ami apparaît dans les moments difficiles, pas dans les grands dîners. C'est ce qui dit un proverbe pakistanais. Bienvenue en Suisse. Aujourd'hui, je vous accueille car nous, les amis du Pakistan, sommes réunis pour faire face à une situation difficile. Il s'agit de soutenir le Pakistan qui a subi de plein fouet l'été dernier les effets dévastateurs, nous l'avons vu, du changement climatique. Face à l'urgence, nous devons agir ensemble de manière efficace et solidaire. La Suisse est aux côtés du Pakistan. Nous devons tendre la main à nos amis et leur garantir qu'ils peuvent compter sur nous. Aujourd'hui, c'est vous, le Pakistan, qui a besoin d'aide, mais demain, c'est peut-être nous tous. Une seule chose est sûre, personne n'est à l'abri. Nous sommes toutes et tous concernés par le dérèglement du climat, un risque global qui nécessite une action globale. Je remercie le secrétaire général des Nations Unies et le Premier ministre du Pakistan d'avoir initié cette conférence internationale sur le Pakistan et le climat. It is an honor to welcome you all to International Geneva. Chers amis, quand la Suisse a appris les effets tragiques des inondations qui ont frappé le Pakistan et son peuple l'été dernier, elle n'a pas hésité. Conformément à notre tradition humanitaire, nous avons immédiatement dépêché une équipe d'experts de l'aide humanitaire suisse dans le nord-ouest du pays. Dotée de 4 millions de francs suisses et engagée durant 3 mois, notre équipe a assuré la reconstruction d'écoles, de systèmes hydrauliques et des ponts. Une récolte de fonds en Suisse a également récolté 5 millions de francs dans l'immédiat pour aider la situation. Ensemble, sur le terrain, nous avons pu agir dans un contexte difficile. Les intempéries ne sont pas, hélas, le seul défi auquel doit faire face cette région d'Asie du Sud. L'afflux de réfugiés afghans ajoute son lot de vulnérabilité et de tension à la situation sur place. Et là encore, mon pays assume ses responsabilités internationales. Mon pays a versé une contribution de 6 millions de francs suisses au Commissariat des Nations Unies en faveur de l'accueil des réfugiés afghans au Pakistan. Excellencies, water overflows where the banks are weak, as a Pakistani saying goes. Cette allégorie me touche, car elle illustre bien le principal défi de la coopération internationale sur le climat. Ensemble, il faut veiller sur elle et la renforcer pour éviter qu'elle ne cède dans les régions fragiles. La Suisse reconnaît ce défi et l'urgence des besoins et nous sommes prêts à soutenir non seulement le dialogue et la recherche de solutions dans la région, mais aussi les efforts financiers qui sont posés. J'aimerais dire ici que la stratégie des 4 RF, reconstruction, remise en état, renouvellement et de la résilience, présentée ici par le Pakistan, est un modèle en la matière. Ce cadre résonne parfaitement dans l'esprit de la Genève internationale et je vous invite à tout mettre en œuvre pour que cette initiative puisse être couronnée de succès. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci, Excellence, et merci de l'accueil. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be now taking a 2 minute so that the speakers can leave the rostrum and the ministers and the other speakers can come to the floor. Please remain in your seats. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting very soon. Can I request everyone to take their seats? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we will be commencing very soon. I would request you to take your seats, please. Yeah. Call to order. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and assalamu alaikum. We will now be commencing the plenary session 1 on Pakistan's resilient recovery strategy, which will be chaired by His Excellency Mr. Ishaq Dar, Minister of Finance and Revenue of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and His Excellency Mr. Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator. I humbly request the chairs to start the session. Mr. Dar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent. Excellencies, distinguished participants, co-chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning and assalamu alaikum. It's a great privilege to be part of this important plenary focused on Pakistan's resilient recovery strategy. I would like to express my gratitude to the Administrator, United Nations Development Programme, Mr. Achim Steiner, representative from the World Bank Group, all other multilateral institutions for the support to Pakistan during this most critical time. Thanks are also due to our bilateral partners, friendly countries, NGOs, and civil society organizations. You would have seen in the opening session the scale of recent flood disaster which took place in Pakistan. With the suffering of the people in mind, I would briefly state the narrative of disaster to highlight the plight of the people back home. Ladies and gentlemen, while Pakistan was facing the challenges caused by global adverse developments like Russian-Ukraine war, energy crisis, rising inflation and hiking poverty, Pakistan faced the catastrophe of unprecedented floods in the recent history. Allow me to reiterate the widespread damages caused by the floods in Pakistan. Last year, the heavy monsoon rains, 6 times of the average of the past 30 years, caused huge flooding and devastation, especially in the provinces of Sindh and Balochistan. The damages were extensive, with 33 million people affected, over 1,700 lives lost, 13,000 injuries, millions of women and children becoming vulnerable. A total of over 13,000 kilometers of roads and 440 bridges were destroyed, while 5 million acres of crop were damaged. Over 2 million houses were either damaged or destroyed, and around 1 million livestock was confirmed to have been dead or missing. Ladies and gentlemen, a significant portion of the country remained submerged in water for months, affecting subsequent crop cycle and closing down schools and hospitals, and making large portion of the rural hinterland inaccessible. The standing buildings were used as temporary shelters and to provide necessary services. It is estimated that 22,000 schools were affected, leaving 3.5 million students without access to classrooms. This is leading to a learning crisis in the country, and it will take coordinated efforts and resources to rebuild the education system. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Pakistan placed recovery and rehabilitation of the affected people as its most important priority. Through Benazir Income Support Program, rupees 70 billion were dispersed as emergency measure to the flood affectees, families, and till now, 8.17 million flood victims have been given the cash assistance. As a result, 2.7 million families got straight away cash relief and the other assistance which was immediately required. We are appreciative of the fact that the World Bank promptly announced $1.6 billion assistance for rehabilitation in flood areas and an additional 500 million for building climate resilient Pakistan. You are aware that PDNA estimated economic and physical losses caused by the floods as over $30 billion. According to their calculation, which are jointly conducted by World Bank, UNDP, European Union, and Asian Development Bank with the assistance of the Planning Ministry of Pakistan, their calculation of the needs for the rehabilitation and reconstruction work is $16.3 billion. We have been working to obviously plan this reconstruction and rehabilitation work over the period of 3 years with at least half of the requirements to be met by Pakistan own system and assistance. Our GDP, keeping in view of the size of the GDP, we believe that over the next 3 years period for this phase of reconstruction and rehabilitation, we should be able to contribute $8 billion out of the $16.3 billion to carry out this rehabilitation and the reconstruction work. The support from the friendly countries and the multilateral donors will not only help with flood relief and rehabilitation effort, but will also create fiscal space and external debt sustainability for the country, reinforcing its efforts to implement the ongoing IMF program. The climate change has led to devastating spillover impacts on Pakistan. This is a major exogenous shock representing a global public externality. Pakistan contributes less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions, but yet it has found itself at the center of climate change-induced devastation in the form of catastrophe of the floods last year. Concerns about food security are paramount. Social stability is also a concern amid high energy prices, inflation, and macroeconomic policies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make it clear that Pakistan remains committed to its international obligations and is on track regarding our macroeconomic fiscal reform agenda, which focuses on increasing our revenues, increasing spending on social sector programs, decreasing expenditure wherever we can moderate, and creating thereby more fiscal space for the reconstruction rehabilitation phase, which we have to undertake in the next 3 years. Pakistan is right now facing challenges on account of additional outlays incurred and projected for the flood-related rescue, relief, and rehabilitation needs. Existing limited space negatively impacts Pakistan's ability to provide resilience and determination to all those affected by the natural disaster. While appreciating the resilience and determination of the people of Pakistan, it is obvious that they need help and global cooperation, which we are thankful to all those who have been extending and communicating to us. Pakistan is carrying out the fiscal reforms necessary for long-term recovery and sustainability. However, we believe that we urgently need short-term assistance as we navigate through a number of challenges. We hope that our friends, partners, and supporters, as always, stand with us by providing the required assistance during this most critical phase of Pakistan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's urgent expectations from this conference is not only merely a commitment of resource for rehabilitation and reconstruction in the short to medium term, but also we are looking forward for on-budget inflows and assistance during the remainder of the current fiscal year in order to make it possible for the government of Pakistan to continue providing the much-needed relief to the flood affectees of 33 million people in Pakistan. Let me say a few words that, if considered appropriate by our friendly countries, debt swaps and other use of financial instruments tied to reallocation of equivalent domestic budgetary resources would also free up the resources to be spent for this noble purpose. We must remember that we are in this fight against climate-induced disaster together. There is only one world, and we must work together to support each other in times of crisis. Pakistan is extremely grateful for the support of the international community as we strive to recover, rehabilitate, and rebuild. At the end, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those friendly countries, United Nations, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and all other multilateral institutions, NGOs, and donors, without whose help we could not have been able to deal with this catastrophe which Pakistan just faced in 2022. I'm extremely grateful to all of you, and thank you for patience listening. God bless you all. Thank you. Very kind.
I now request His Excellency Mr. Achim Steiner, the UNDP Administrator, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Minister of Finance of Pakistan, distinguished ministers and fellow panelists, dear Martin, my colleague from the World Bank. Let me also, on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, join the Secretary General and my co-chair in welcoming you both to this meeting here, but also to an attempt to break new ground. I was just looking at the presence of ministers of Pakistan on this podium. If you look from left to right, I think you will recognize that we are living in a different age in which climate change, natural disasters, economy, planning, and indeed the development pathways of countries are being rewritten by circumstance, sometimes by design at others, by disasters on other occasions. Just a few months ago, Pakistan endured one of the most destructive climate-induced disasters in recorded history. We have heard from the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, from you, my dear co-chair, just now, some of the numbers. But behind those numbers lie destroyed livelihoods, lost lives, but above all, the extraordinary challenge of how do you restore hope when you are faced with such a gigantic task. And to do so on the back of a reality where Pakistan, like virtually every other country over the last 2-3 years, was just emerging from COVID-19, a pandemic, and all that it did to our societies. Today, the floodwaters may have partially receded, but what remains is a monumental moment of reckoning for the entire world. The Secretary-General spoke to it, the Prime Minister, and so together with international partners, including the United Nations, Pakistan is now undertaking an urgent and extraordinary initiative to save lives, restore livelihoods, and rebuild the nation. Pakistan, as you just said, Minister, faces a long road to recovery. The wider world faces a choice, because the truth is that these events are increasingly predictable, and only the latest in a series of such disasters in Pakistan and beyond, historic climate events that are becoming the new normal. Today, on the 9th of January, we are meeting. Look to the east in Australia, extraordinary flood events. Look to the west in California, extreme weather events. Look to Central Europe, and people are wondering what happened to snow in winter. We are living in profoundly changing times. And in Pakistan, at this moment, we have an opportunity to choose a new direction with an innovative model for international cooperation. And I have to say that when, just a few weeks ago, we began an intense effort of convening and organizing this conference here, framed not as a pledging conference, but really as a conference about how we move beyond reacting to every disaster by having just an emergency response. This conference is being convened by Pakistan and the United Nations with a different logic and also a different aspiration. And I hope that by the time that you leave this conference venue this evening, you will feel reassured that the call to the world that Pakistan sent out to friends, supporters, partners to step up at this critical moment has actually been responded to. A few weeks ago, that was not at all self-evident. I must say today I feel extremely excited about the prospect of framing a new form of response and partnership. It is time to step up and support the long-term, the systems-based approaches to recovery when disaster strikes again. Pakistan, and that is a recognition that I think the world also recognized, is not in its plight alone. And indeed, it is not even in the broader context of climate change one of the most significant emitters, less than 1%. And yet it is, in terms of its ranking on the Global Climate Risk Index, the 8th most vulnerable country in the world. And to those who say, well, is climate change and flood events really linked? How else would you explain what Pakistan in just one decade has been experiencing, not in terms of just on its own, but remember the images of the last 12 months, of forest fires, of droughts, of floods, of extreme weather events, hurricanes, typhoons. This is the new normal, and we need to, as an international community, find a way in which we together can respond to this new normal. The government of Pakistan, as you have also laid out just now, is doing its part in recovery and reconstruction, but it will need financial and technical support to tackle the massive development challenges that lie ahead, including building the systems for resilience. Advancing reconstruction of this type will require fiscal space on the back of COVID-19 that is currently severely constrained in Pakistan, as you also said, Minister. Creating this space will require new pathways for support, including private sector investments facilitated by innovative financial instruments, including the de-risking of private capital and support for a pipeline of broader investment opportunities, including some of the innovative forms that you mentioned just now. Here and now, that process must begin with new investments in climate resilience, broader coalitions of partners, and just a look around this room and the announcements you will hear today will, I think, illustrate that this is not a desired future. It is now becoming, through the experience that Pakistan has gone through, a reality that we all are part of. And critically, collective responsibility for the shocking loss and damage from which no nation will be immune in the future, as also the Foreign Minister of Switzerland pointed out in his opening remarks. Assessing the extent of damages and losses has been a pivotal part of this joint response under the leadership of the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives, the United Nations, together with the Asia Development Bank, the European Union, the World Bank, and our UN sister agencies also in the UN country team, work together with you to complete the post-disaster needs assessment, the foundation for today's framework for recovery. And it identified some 16 billion in urgently needed financing to support the recovery. The assessment directly informed this resilient recovery, rehabilitation, reconstruction framework, the 4RF. We always have strange ways of baptizing these very real things into very technocratic language, but 4RF it is. A comprehensive policy-based approach comprising sectoral interventions, public and private sector financial strategies, and implementation and monitoring arrangements. We now look forward to the presentation of this framework, and I also want to particularly thank His Excellency Professor Ahsan Iqbal, the Minister of Planning, Development and Reform of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, for the excellent partnership that we as an international community, and I think, Martin, I speak on your behalf as well, have enjoyed in working together under great pressure, but also with great purpose and direction in the last few months. Thank you so much.
I now request His Excellency Professor Ahsan Iqbal, Minister for Planning, Development and Reform of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, to say a few words.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming here. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for coming here today to express solidarity with the people of Pakistan who have experienced worst climate disaster of recent times. Pakistan has faced floods in 2022, but as one of the most vulnerable countries to climate disasters, we face a range of disasters that we experienced during 2022, starting with very high temperatures, forest fires, droughts, culminating into unprecedented floods within a short span of 4 months. Pakistan's disasters like torrential floods, glacial lake outburst flood, and just to mention that Pakistan has the highest snow after North Pole and South Pole in its northern areas, which is at the danger of melting and causing glacial lake outburst floodings. We face droughts, heat waves, earthquakes, and during this year, as I said, we have experienced almost all of them. The heat wave of 2022 was the hottest in 61 years. So I can safely say that Pakistan is in the eye of climate change storm. Disaster's return period average has become shorter from 56 years in 1929 to only 5 to 6 years in 2005. So that shows that the frequency of disasters is increasing at a rapid pace. The horror of our coming era will be born out of heat, fire, water, and snow. Ladies and gentlemen, all these disasters have impacted our economy in a very serious manner. Huge economic losses due to damage of infrastructure and loss of crops, significant losses in GDP, higher poverty rates, great risk of preventable diseases, especially to most vulnerable segments, women, children, and elderly, unprecedented recovery and reconstruction needs, degradation of ecosystem, degradation of environment and climate, job loss and disruption. Women and girls are at risk of gender-based violence and child marriage, degradation of environment and climate, hyper-poverty and hyper-malnutrition. The worst part of the floods in 2022 was that it was not only a climate disaster, but it also turned into a human tragedy as it hit the 20 poorest districts of Pakistan. So those people who were already poor, who were already malnourished, have been thrown into a cycle of hyper poverty and hyper malnutrition. Next, please. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2022 floods were of a scale never seen before. 33 million people in different parts of Pakistan were affected. More than 1,700 have lost their lives, and 1/3 of them are children, and more than 8 million are displaced. And the two provinces, Sindh and Balochistan, have been almost completely devastated. But the other provinces, Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and our special regions in the north, have also been significantly impacted, but they continue to be most vulnerable to future disasters. Next. With the help of our development partners, we have also been able to identify what were the damages and losses due to these floods. We are very grateful to World Bank, Asian Development Bank, European Union, UN and its agencies, and other development partners for working as a team to document in shortest possible time the post-disaster need assessment report for Pakistan, which put $14.9 billion damage and $15.23 billion of economic loss, with combined cost of over $30 billion to Pakistan's economy. This was a massive blow and hit to an economy which was just beginning to recover from crisis. And this also makes Pakistan very unique. Ladies and gentlemen, every country has faced pandemic. Every country is today facing the supply shock, but no country has experienced a disaster of this scale that Pakistan has faced. So therefore, the case of Pakistan is very different and unique. The social sectors, housing, health, education, culture and heritage had serious damages. In infrastructure, road, transport, railway communication, energy, water, sanitation, municipal services, community infrastructures were damaged. In our productive sectors, agriculture, food, livestock, fisheries, water resources, irrigation, commerce, and industries were damaged, and governance, social sustainability, inclusion of gender, social protection, livelihoods were lost. Next, please. The previous one, the previous, please. Previous. And let me here share with you that Pakistan was one of the first countries to adopt Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. We called SDGs as National Development Goals. Our parliament passed a resolution to adopt Sustainable Development Goals, and we started to work on SDGs right away. But these floods, ladies and gentlemen, have washed all the gains that we made during 7 years. Almost 9 million people have been pushed into poverty. Additional 7.6 million people are facing food insecurity. 17 million women and children are at greater risk of preventable diseases. 4.3 million people with job loss and disruption to their livelihoods, and more than 600,000 women and girls at risk of gender-based violence and child marriage due to disaster situation. Next, please. Next. Next. So towards recovery, ladies and gentlemen, we have developed a 4RF framework. Its details are there in your packet also. You can read in more greater detail how to have resilient recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction framework. The vision is an inclusive and resilient recovery through a whole of Pakistan approach, leading to sustainable development for the people and the country, The objectives are to improve governance and enhance capacity of state institutions to face the disasters and mitigate against them, restore livelihoods and economic opportunities, ensure social inclusion and participation in all aspects of recovery and related development, restore and improve basic services and physical infrastructure. And above all, also underlying important objective is to achieve sustainable climate resilience through rebuilding and re-engineering our infrastructure. Our challenge as Ministry of Planning is double. Not only we have to build a new infrastructure, a modern infrastructure for future development, we also have to re-engineer our built infrastructure to be more resilient and adaptable for future shocks. So the foundation is Build Back Better, people-centered socio-economic recovery, building systematic resilience against natural hazards and climate change impacts. Next. The 4 RF sectors have 4 major goals: governance, whose cost has been estimated at $413 billion, strategic resilient objective, resilience plan, objective 2, agriculture, livelihood, finance markets, $4.3 billion, SRO 3, social inclusion, including gender, culture, heritage, $1.7 billion, and 4, education, health, nutrition, water, sanitation, municipal services, infrastructure, energy, transport, $10.08 billion, which makes it $16.28 billion, according to the PDNA. The government of Pakistan plans to do 50% of the $60 billion through its own resources and is requesting international community development partners to help it cope this burden by providing $8 billion over the next 3 years so that we can rebuild our damaged infrastructure in shortest possible time. The long-term climate resilient infrastructure development plan is over $13 billion, which involves National Flood Protection Program and building new infrastructure or re-engineering existing infrastructure to stand against future shocks. Next. As I told you, out of $16.3 billion, the local resources we hope to mobilize are $8.15 billion, and we look forward to $8.15 billion through our friends and development partners. Next. We have worked out a number of projects in different areas, starting with forecasting and preparedness, which involves capacity building of Pakistan Met Department, Federal Flood Commission, multi-hazard early warning systems, installation and upgradation of telemetries, data center for disaster prevention. Then mobilization, rescue and relief, capacity building of National Disaster Management Authority, Provincial Disaster Management Authorities, District Disaster Management Authorities, procurement of helicopters, boats and other equipment for evacuation, procurement of emergency bridges and other equipment, and then in recovery, financial assistance for people for their livelihood. Next, please. Rehabilitation, housing, health, education, gender inclusion, private sector development, water and sanitation, and reconstruction of infrastructure to make it more resilient. Next, please. Next. So let me in the end, ladies and gentlemen, say that Pakistan is already in a very difficult and challenging situation. In 1989, Pakistan was left to cater to 3.5 million refugees when international community abandoned the region. We are still suffering. At that time, if international community had put in $10 to $20 billion to stabilize the region, between 2001 and 2021, in 20 years, it would not have to spend $2.5 trillion fighting a war in Afghanistan, which comes to about $120 billion per year. In 2021, again our region has been abandoned for Pakistan to face the consequences of instability at its western borders. On top, we have a $30 billion climate disaster. Let me say that today there are no islands of instability and conflicts. Prosperity can only be secure if it is shared with everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important things we can do on this earth is to let people know they are not alone. The young mother with no milk to feed her children, let her know she's not alone. Children who have seen their schools destroyed are out of school, let them know they're not alone. Poor who have lost their shelter and are facing chills of winter season, let them know they're not alone. Farmers who have lost their livestock and are without livelihood, let them know they're not alone. Mothers and children who are malnourished, now hyper-malnourished, let them know they are not alone. Youth who have lost their jobs, let them know they are not alone. And the sick who have lost access to health services, help them know that they are not alone. Ministry of Planning and Development has set up a special unit to work with development partners to translate the commitments you will make into reality, and I assure you of our full cooperation and support. Thank you very much.
I now request Her Excellency Ms. Shari Rahman, Minister of Climate Change of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I distinguish co-chairs Achim Steiner and Minister Ishaq Dar, fellow ministers here from Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Pakistan, thank you for your patience, your time and your commitment for bringing your value system here today. It is obviously the moral engine of recovery for all, and the coalition of the willing that the Prime Minister of Pakistan spoke about that brings this convening to the kind of critical mass we see today. So thank you for your commitment, for working and assisting with recovery for all. I know that we have been describing our 4 hours recovery. We have also been talking about the catastrophic climate-induced floods that you saw about. You saw a video, you've been hearing about the disaster statistics. So I won't repeat them. I believe brevity can be also a part of the solution. You do know that Pakistan, it has been established that Pakistan is on the front lines of a very clear extreme weather and climate precipice. People have spoken here about how many of your countries, and again, we come to the first cascade of thanks, which will be followed later by the Minister EAD, who were there on the ground. In the phase of humanitarian disaster, my co-chair and of course the UNDP, the entire UN system, our development partners, the World Bank, all the related UN agencies, ADP, everybody and the UN agencies, Save the Children, many NGOs were on the ground, international NGOs as well as Pakistanis. All had their sleeves rolled up and gumboots on the ground. So we do appreciate all of you who came by, who journeyed to the heart of the catastrophe and saw for yourselves what the monsoon on steroids actually looked like. And of course, the front line of that was the UN Secretary General, who proved to be one of the most powerful advocates for bringing resolve, commitment, and resources to a country that was in shock for many months. Now, ladies and gentlemen, so thank you all. But you saw on the ground, many of you have heard also that Pakistanis are a resilient people. But, as you saw in the video, for Pakistan, the peril is not over. 8 million still live in inundated areas, particularly the province of Sindh, and a homeless winter for many. Now, 20 million are still affected, which is, again, 3 times the size of many countries. And this winter has brought the 19th century back to the human health experience. It has brought dangers and risks that humanity had forgotten how to plan for. It has brought perils to Pakistan that this century had stopped accounting for. So in this peninsula of human suffering that we all saw, and 33 million certainly is a peninsula of great human tragedy. What we saw at some points was no antibiotics, a lack of antibiotics, a lack of medicine, a lack of infant food. These are not things, I'm not talking about cutting edge IT education. I'm talking about the basics of human survival. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a new tidal wave of disasters that are besetting the world, and we need to be very clear. They will not go away by themselves, and they will not, countries who are facing such front lines, the ground zero, as I called it, of climate stress, will not recover on their own. There is no default setting to nature or to human recovery at this scale. You saw the water as it ripped through Pakistan, 1/3 of Pakistan, the magnitude and velocity. It was pulling out huge bridges, built back better, like toothpicks in its fury. So building back better is going to be harder than we planned for and harder than we imagined. We had seen the 2010 flood. It was a great flood. It was called the super floods of Pakistan. Well, it affected 20 million people. So just to put in perspective, this one was 33 million. We hope and pray and also plan for ensuring that no such bigger disaster overtakes this particular catastrophe, because wrapping one's head around the sheer numbers to service has been a monumental challenge. So everyone has responded, of course, wonderfully, but it is to be remembered that while we are building for resilience, Pakistan lies in one of the largest floodplains of the world. And it has created now the way the topography of certainly of the province of Sindh, whose chief minister is present here, has been transformed probably forever. There are lakes that are sitting there, the size, probably over 100 kilometers, impossible to drain for a year, transforming the land we till, the livelihoods that live off it, and of course giving our great Indus River, which has been a lifeline for Pakistan, a new geography. So while we're living in these areas, what I call the axis of vulnerability, it is time to look very hard at how risk management is part of a cascade of ongoing, timely, and agile investments that can build up the defenses, the shields that societies need to stand up to what the Secretary General called the war that nature is waging now on the world. As one of my colleagues said here very ably, Pakistan has been next door to a long war, one of the longest war in the world, and home to a high cohort of refugees. We are a hospitable people, but we are no match, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, no match for a war that nature may unleash through no fault of our own. Now, this is not about ascribing responsibility, or this is about burden sharing. We are seeking to build that coalition of the willing to do what the Prime Minister very succinctly stated, to kickstart a strategic reset in how societies think about resilience and sustainability, in how societies work across borders as nation states and people, to create new islands of resilience that grow to become a planet that we can be confident to inhabit for the future without risk. Now, I just want to say that strategic interventions in rebuilding with flood resilience do not mean the $16.3 billion that Minister Essen has spoken to you about are about frontline basic flood resilience and some segues into the storm drains, the large storm drains the country needs, because we need a new architecture of flood resilience, clearly, as well as an old one that needs investment. We have one of the largest man-made irrigation systems in the world. But having said that, and we maintain it very well, but having said that, what is in our way right now? Two things. Capacity, that is technical capacity, the ability to build bankable projects that we are told to compete with on the financing market, because the amount of projectization that is needed is literally the size of 2 or 3 small European countries. So yes, we need the technical capacity, and we need it yesterday. What is going to, I think, swing things for us to kind of make the worm turn, if you like, is an uninterrupted, the second thing needed is uninterrupted supply of funding and resources. Now, when I say uninterrupted, what I mean is when that link is broken in the chain of funding, when a province, when a district, when a people, when a community has to wait, and a project has begun, it is lying there, someone, as we call them, as PC1s on paper, it does not translate into a defense by the next time the disaster rolls round, because the province and that district, because all adaptation eventually is local, it must be local, it must have feet on the ground, will not catch on or have built that resilience by the time the next summer rolls round. And we have lived through a catastrophe. I did not show you the 2022 climate video that I showed at COP. That was a new archipelago of complete disaster, famines, flash fires, forest fires, floods, and of course the glacial lake outburst floods. They've tripled. We have the largest number of glaciers outside the polar region. They are also melting fast. So we need to create that wall, and I am asking very clearly for that lifeline that will manage, that will help Pakistanis manage predictability for basic survival. And that is really the polycrisis, only way to confront the polycrisis that is hitting us. And yes, that's a new word for the 21st century, because the challenges for the 21st century are entirely new. I just hope, ladies and gentlemen, that we are able to build up the speed and agility to respond with the kind of compassion that is needed and foresight. Thank you very much for your. I think I overspoke. Thank you.
I now request His Excellency Mr. Ayaz Sadiq, Minister Economic Affairs Division, Government of Pakistan, to say a few words.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and assalamu alaikum. My colleagues have given all details that were necessary to be shared with you, and speaking in the end means we are short of time, and I'm sure we are. So I'll be very brief. No, not only you, but... So, on behalf of the Government of Pakistan and the Ministry of Economic Affairs, I would like to take this opportunity to extend my profound appreciation to the United Nations for the support in organizing and making excellent arrangements for this very important conference. Since the outset of the floods, as directed by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Ministry of Economic Affairs has worked closely with the United Nations in Pakistan and the international development partners for provision of immediate humanitarian relief, assistance, rehabilitation for flood affectees. At the beginning of August 2022, the Ministry of Economic Affairs immediately liaised with the development partners and took steps including establishment of a steering committee comprising of development partners, international, national stakeholders for ensuring better coordination and supervision of humanitarian relief work. The Ministry of Economic Affairs also organized a donors conference in late August 2022, presided over by the Prime Minister and attended by a large number of development partners, aimed at highlighting Pakistan's immediate relief and rescue needs. Excellencies, our bilateral, multilateral partners have been most forthcoming in their response to Pakistan's call for help. The solid collaboration with our development partners brought forth immediate assistance in various forms, provided relief for millions of the stranded Pakistanis, for which we are grateful. The assistance included cash transfers for the flood-affected people who had lost everything: food, medicine, shelter, clean drinking water, etc. Our development partners have always helped Pakistan during the different calamities faced, including the many devastating earthquakes and floods in the past. Although I would have preferred to have thanked each development partner for having supported us during the difficult times, yet that would have taken a lot of the allocated time. The Ministry of Economic Affairs, being the government's main arm for coordinating international assistance, continues to fulfill its role monitoring, supervising the inflow of aid. It is pertinent to mention that Prime Minister of Pakistan has given directions for vigorous scrutiny and monitoring, ensuring complete transparency in the utilization of the valuable assistance provided by our development partners. It is with this promise that we will continue to partner with the international community in implementing the 4RF and planning ahead to meet challenges of climate change. The government of Pakistan looks forward to significant support from its development partners in rebuilding Pakistan in the aftermath of the devastation caused by the floods. In this regard, the Ministry of Economic Affairs Division will adopt a robust system for monitoring and work with the international development partners, ensuring proper follow-up on the assistance pledges made during the conference and the effective and efficient utilization in Pakistan, leading to focused people-centric development and resilient rehabilitation and reconstruction process. I would once again like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations for organizing this conference and to the international development partners for their continued support. I tried my best to read as quick as possible, in shorthand in fact, and I've omitted a few things which I wanted to say so that we'll save time. Thank you, co-chairs.
Before I request World Bank President Mr. Martin Reza to say a few words and give closing remarks, I wish to acknowledge and thank him for his very quick arrangement of the round table at the time of annual meetings in Washington last October, post-flood episode which Pakistan suffered. Thank you, Mr. Reza, once again. Floor is yours for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Excellencies, ministers, distinguished participants, thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to offer some brief closing remarks. The 2022 floods were an unprecedented disaster, as I was able to witness firsthand in Sindh province last September. Let me begin by congratulating the ministers and all the Pakistani authorities for your leadership and speed, both at the federal and provincial levels, in the immediate relief and humanitarian response. Let me also commend you in how you are planning and framing the massive reconstruction efforts as outlined in the presentation of Honourable Minister Iqbal just now. The World Bank has worked closely with the Asian Development Bank, the European Union and the United Nations in supporting the preparation of the post-disaster needs assessment and parts of the resilient recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction framework, the 4RF. And I trust I speak also on behalf of all of us in thanking you for the good partnership. The framework sets out a clearly prioritized and sequenced set of activities over the short, medium and long term. Its ambition matches the sheer magnitude of the disaster that has hit your country, including through the PDNA's estimates of damages and losses. We welcome the fact that the first strategic objective of the 4RF relates to the governance, institutional transparency and capacity aspects of the reconstruction effort. These will be absolutely essential to make the reconstruction journey a success, and you can count on all of us to support you to implement these principles and help ensure a well-targeted, efficient and transparent reconstruction process. The 4RF document represents an important foundation for our joint efforts over the coming months and years. I understand it is a living document which will be enriched as specific reconstruction projects crystallize further. We're pleased that a number of these projects, including in the provinces, have already started and have been designed following the 4RF principles. We also welcome the government of Pakistan's long-term vision to ensure national resilience to climate-induced disasters. The Prime Minister and Honourable Minister Sherry Rahman talked of a strategic reset. Indeed, the costs of doing nothing are just too high. The World Bank's Climate Change Development Report for Pakistan that was launched at COP27 with the participation of the Honourable Minister, thank you for joining us at that event, suggests that the economic losses from extreme heat, flood and air pollution could total 18 to 20% of GDP by 2050. This could wipe out a significant share of Pakistan's economic progress. The poor would be most affected by failure to act, with rural poverty rates at risk of remaining stuck at current high levels of above 30%, even 30 years from now. The 22 floods are a tragic reminder of just these risks. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the 4RF reconstruction framework rightly emphasizes the need to ensure macroeconomic stability and sustain related structural reforms, and Minister Dar, you spoke about this. While international financial assistance for reconstruction will be critical, it can only be effective if the economic reform momentum led by your government is maintained. Economic conditions are challenging, not just because of the costs of the floods on GDP and the burden of relief and reconstruction efforts on the budget. High global energy and food prices and a legacy of poor fiscal management add to the burden. New spending for flood relief and recovery must therefore be balanced with the need to keep spending within sustainable limits. This can only happen if relief and recovery efforts are carefully targeted towards those most in need. Over the medium term, a truly resilient recovery would not be possible without additional fiscal and structural reforms. This is the time to reduce leakages and losses in expenditure, for instance in the power sector, that are weakening public finances, to address the inefficiencies that are muting investments and exports, and to better target social support to those most in need, and to make sure that those that are most fortunate in society and all sectors contribute to this national reconstruction effort through more progressive, wider-based taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Prime Minister has emphasized, Pakistan has shown incredible resilience throughout its 75-year history. We trust that it is in these moments of national tragedy that your country will come together, as it has come today with the welcome presence of both federal and provincial authorities around a national consensus focused on sustainable, inclusive and resilient development. You can count on the World Bank's continued support as you work to realize this vision and your country's tremendous potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reiser. Before we take a coffee break, please bear with me for a minute for just some housekeeping practical announcements. Lunch will be served one floor above at the mezzanine floor, level 2, the entrance level. You can avail the lunchtime to also visit room 25, where UN agencies will exhibit materials of their work in Pakistan, and colleagues will be available for any queries. After lunch, at the end of plenary session 2, we will be breaking out into 2 sessions. Provinces, Perspective and Humanitarian Spotlight, which will be in this room, and the second on achieving sustainable climate resilience, showcasing the living Indus, will be held in room 25, and there will be someone to guide you there. Also, as you already know, there are no food or drinks allowed in the conference room. Thank you so much. I now invite you for coffee, which is served right outside this room, and we will be grateful if we could reconvene after 15 minutes. Thank you so much.